Trigger warning, this episode we will discuss suicide and military sexual trauma. If this topic is sensitive to you, you are free to stop watching now.
Welcome, Shivetsu community. I'm Althea, your host, and today we have a remarkable guest joining us. Did you know that veterans, particularly women, face unique challenges in mental health with suicide rates higher than the national average? Our guest today, Tara Reyna, serves as the Veteran Suicide Prevention Coordinator, working tirelessly to combat this crisis. Join us as we delve into her journey, the challenges women veterans face, and the critical role she plays in suicide prevention. Tara, welcome to She Vets It. How are
Thanks.
you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great and so glad to have you here. I want to get right into it. Can you share your journey and what led you to become the Veteran Suicide Prevention Coordinator?
Sure. So I get asked a lot if I'm a veteran myself because I've worked with the military community for so long. And I always have the same answer, which is, God, no, the military would not want me. I can't even do a push up. But I was immersed sort of in the military culture. I moved to Hawaii in 2007 as a civilian. I had a friend whose husband was in the military. And while I was there, met a guy who was in the Army. He was a helicopter pilot. And we dated for just under a year. I usually refer to him as my fiancé because I had a promise ring, and that was sort of the plan. So my fiance's name was Earl, deployed to Iraq in 2009, and unfortunately, 2 months into his deployment, he was killed in a helicopter crash. So I was very quickly thrown into the what we call the surviving military community, and got paired up with some different organizations, and spent the next several years kind of working through my grief and learning from other military survivors, other fiancés, spouses, parents, all the different relationships. And then through that experience, I kind of knew that I wanted my career to help people. And I felt this calling to work with the military because I thought it would be a really great way to honor his memory. And so I started working with the surviving military community. I worked for an organization called TAPS. And then I also worked for an organization called Survivor Outreach Services. Both of them, again, work with the surviving military community. So I did that for about 5 or 6 years, went back to school, got my degree in clinical mental health counseling in 2020. And then the following year started working for Texas Health and Human Services as the Veteran Suicide Prevention Coordinator. So that's kind of where I'm at today. So I kind of went from like the post-vention side of things when it comes to suicide specifically. About half of our families had lost their service member to suicide. And then now I'm in the prevention, intervention, and post-vention phase. So, yeah.
Well, I want to first thank you for your service. I know a lot of times we think it's just veterans that serve, but our families, fiancés, those that are loved ones, they serve too. When we lose a veteran, whether you were married, you two were together. So I want to my condolences to you for your loss, but I
Thank
do
you.
appreciate all the things that you're doing for our community because we definitely need you.
Yeah,
And so yeah, so thank you so much.
thanks.
um, Now, going into the veteran suicide prevention program that you have, what are some specific initiatives and strategies you have found that has been effective in preventing veteran suicide in your role?
So one of the main things is just access to resources. So a lot of times in suicide prevention, we think of mental health. And while that is definitely a huge part of it, it's also access to housing. It's support during transition periods. It is assistance and support in navigating the job market and all that sort of stuff. So with Texas Health and Human Services, we have a program called TVFA, which stands for Texas Veterans and Family Alliance. And what this does is it allows us to give grant money to, I believe this year it's 19 organizations across the state of Texas to run military family specific programs. And so these programs do help with all of those sort of services. They will hold different support groups and things like that. They provide supplemental activities such as like equine therapy, art therapy, all that. They have support groups for families. They have the mental health services that are needed. And then that allows, like, that kind of clears up some other funds for them to do financial resources. And then, of course, there's other organizations that are separate from us that offer that too. The vet centers, which are separate from the VA. A lot of people think they're the same, but the vet centers are able to provide different types of assistance and things like that. So it's access to all of that. Specifically, when we're looking at suicide, one of the main things that I like to tell people is that what the VA has found, this is sort of their main initiative, is what they call lethal means safety. And what that is it is education around, when we say means, it's the mechanism or the manner in which someone is intending to take their life. And so it's knowledge about the importance of putting time and distance between someone with thoughts of suicide and their intended means. In the military community, as you can imagine, this is generally firearms. It's higher in Texas, it's higher in the military community. We're seeing it go up increasingly with female veterans too, which is, I know, predominantly who you focus on. So all of that to say, there is trying to think of a concise way to sort of explain all of this. And I'm kind of going off here. I'm probably giving you more information than you're asking, but
no, good information.
When someone is in a suicidal crisis, it is generally short-lived. So that means that period of time where they are like in it and they're in this heightened state of emotion and they're like, I can't do this, their prefrontal cortex is very likely turned off, which is what allows them to register time. And so they very genuinely feel in their body like this feeling is going to last forever because they can't distinguish that this is temporary. So they act on those thoughts very quickly. About half the time, they act within 10 minutes of deciding that they do want to act on them. So people might have thoughts kind of over days, weeks, months, even years, sort of intermittently. But once they have decided to act on them, the amount of time between decision and action, half the time is 10 minutes. So putting time and distance between someone with thoughts and then their intended means allows for interruption, allows for someone to intervene, allows more time for someone to get back into their logical brain, reach out for help themselves, take a step back, reevaluate their decision. And all of that prevents actual action from happening, which is so key when we are looking at someone who is utilizing a firearm, because firearms are highly lethal and generally irreversible. So putting time and distance between someone with thoughts of suicide and their intended means. And this can look a variety of ways. So using blister packs and things like that for medication, making sure medications are locked up, getting rid of expired medications. Firearms would be removing the firing pin, giving access to somebody else in the house to store them where only they have the combination or have access to them, having a buddy or close family member actually physically hang on to the entire firearm. I know that's not something for some people. They're like, God, no, like I'm keeping it in my house. But again, so you can use cable locks, trigger locks, remove the firing pin, lots of different ways that are going to put more time in between actually being able to pull the trigger, quite frankly. So I hope that was helpful. Gosh, that was a lot.
So we were talking about suicide, and I shared with you offline how, just ironically, last week, a family friend committed suicide. And one of the family members feel kind of guilty, feels like, could there have been something he could have done to prevent it, because this person comes over all the time. He's almost like the therapist. And he was like, is there something I could have done to prevent that? Maybe I should have went over to the house, but he didn't. What advice or what words would you give to that individual?
So on one hand, I would want to tell them and kind of like normalize that guilt and let them know that like this is a very common emotion. One of the things that makes suicide deaths more complex than, a different manner, because it comes with this guilt and the, oh my gosh, I could have, I should have, what if I had, all of those sort of things. So on one hand, I want to normalize that guilt. On the other hand, it's important to acknowledge that it is not anybody's fault when somebody takes action on their own life. We all want to feel that we have control over ourselves, our lives, things like that. And ultimately that is the case, so this person who unfortunately died by suicide, they made that decision. And it's important to remember that we cannot be all things to all people. We are not psychics. We cannot know when somebody is like going through the thick of things. And it is literally impossible to be there for people and be readily available and know when those moments are going to happen. Nobody has that capability. If we did, there would not be suicide deaths, there wouldn't. And so what I would recommend is to allow those feelings, but to do what they can to not get stuck in them, if that makes sense. Because, if I just say, no, you shouldn't feel guilty, then it's like, they have this guilt. They're gonna, like, maybe they're going to try and compartmentalize it or push it away. And it's like, no, process that, ask yourself the different questions, explore that, all the while knowing that it is not your fault. It's not anything that anyone did or didn't do or said or didn't say, like that sort of thing. When it comes down to it, we can help people put the time and distance between themselves and their means, but we cannot necessarily stop the reasons that people have thoughts of suicide. We can help, but that's a very big task. And so, I guess I'm trying to think of some other uplifting words that I could say, but I really think that's kind of it. It's like, feel the feelings, acknowledge them, and then let them pass. Be like, okay, this is what this is. And, kind of go on this way. Like, we are ultimately each responsible for ourselves.
And I like what you said, do not compartmentalize it, because then when you do that, you really don't give yourself permission to heal.
Right.
And so at some point you may not address it now, but it may show up later in some other form.
Right. Feelings are feelings. They're not good or bad. And even if you don't want to feel them, I'm sure this person doesn't want to feel guilty, but they do. So feel it. And then, let it pass, and it'll probably come back, and then let it pass. So,
and then too, I was just, I shared with them is that, it was 4 a.m. You're not generally around him 4 a.m.
Right.
So that's something to think about. And I remember, at the mental health forum, there were some stats on, those that may take their lives. And I've seen those that were unemployed, truck drivers. I was just really, really surprised in those stats. And so I don't know if the ones that were unemployed, if it has anything with, finding that sense of purpose in life and not knowing what that next step is going to be.
Oh, I think that's probably a huge contributor. So right now, what research is telling us, this is from the VA, is that the highest rate of suicide is happening within the first year after veterans separate from the military. So compared to when they're on active duty status, the suicide rate is 2.5 times during that first year post-separation. And this makes sense because as humans, we don't like change, and transitions are hard. And for all humans, right, our biggest stressors in life tend to be divorces, moves, and job changes. Well, you're guaranteed to have 2 of those happening, a move and a job change. This one's probably going to get tested if you are a married person, but, not guaranteed divorce, but you're guaranteed a move and a job change. So you're already having 2 of life's biggest stressors thrown at you. And you might be transitioning to the civilian world, to the, to student status, like all that sort of stuff. But that is a major theme that we see, is that sense of purpose and that sense of identity is taken away when you separate from the military. And so the employment piece for sure, because while you might find a job, it might just be a job to pay the bills, because people have families and they've got to do the thing, and they might not feel a part of a community. They might not feel like they're doing something for the greater good or, serving somebody, right? There's a lot of pride in serving your country when you're in the military. And that might not be the thing when you're just like maybe like a delivery person or something. Not that that's not an honorable job, but might not come with that same purpose. So I think for sure the employment piece can be it, and that ties into the purpose and identity.
And I wanted to share that, and I wanted to make sure I put it out there that suicide is not exclusive to the military community. And
Correct.
so, although we talk about it in this space, but I definitely want to make sure that people know that, suicide can happen outside of the military as well. Matter of fact, the family friend was not a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he may have been in his 60s. He wasn't young, had a family, a business person. You know, I would
Mm-hmm.
consider, he was pretty financially stable,
Mm-hmm.
a little, possibly a little well to do. And so he didn't fit a stereotype. Like if they put a lineup of people that I thought that would have commit suicide, he would definitely be one that I'm like, nope, he's not. Put
Yeah.
him over here, because he
Yeah.
did not fit what we would stereotype as someone who we would deem maybe not mentally stable. He looked
Right.
like he had it together. Everything in life was going a-okay. And so you
Right.
can't judge people by appearance, their status, because suicide can happen no matter what your age is, your race, your background. So that part is something and I don't know the reason, but I always say, always check on your strong friends,
Yeah. I like
you
that.
know, because your strong friends, a lot of times they're helping so many other people that a lot of times they are not there to help themselves.
Right.
And so they actually are probably worn out a little more than the person that's receiving help all the time.
Mhm.
The one that
Yeah.
asks for help, they're
Yeah.
good. It's the
Yeah.
ones who are doing all the helping that no one reciprocates that same support.
Yeah.
So I definitely wanted to share that, and then go to the one question, going back to women veterans, is how do you see challenges women veterans face in terms of mental health and suicide prevention? You did mention earlier that women veterans numbers are increasing.
Correct. So I think the one thing that comes to mind initially is that is military sexual trauma. So though we can see this in all genders, research is only done in the binary, so men and women. Women generally will access mental health services more, but they are the ones that are more likely to have experienced military sexual trauma, or MST. Y'all love your acronyms. And so I think while we are seeing awareness of that increase, and we're seeing that in the civilian community as well, we're still really far behind. And there's still a lot of personal, I'm going to say personal demons that people have to work through. I'm a very holistic person, right? I attribute things to how things feel physically in the body, because we know that trauma is stored in the body. So physically, while someone is getting this message from people about, here's a support group, we can talk about it, you can get disability, like whatever it is, if they are physically like doing this at the thought of verbalizing, I mean, I just got chills. If they're doing this and their body is like just rejecting that ability to even verbalize it or go and take those first steps, even though cognitively they know that it's okay, and cognitively they know that there's a support available, physiologically that does not feel safe. It doesn't feel okay. And so I think education about how trauma is stored and what we can do to sort of process that and alleviate that and tease it out of the body, if you will. I'm not really sure how else to say that, but like allow that to slowly, kind of unravel. I think that is key. And that, that goes for all genders, for all human, civilian, military. But again, because you're dealing with sexual trauma and political things that come with that, and repercussions and fear of chain of command and, things like that. And sometimes like that's who the perpetrators are. Right. And so it's like people are just stuck. They're isolated. They're like, I literally have nobody to go to. So there's structural dynamics that challenge the ability for women to get help. And then there's that physiological piece that I mentioned about, it really just does not feel physically safe in their body to go and speak to somebody or to reach out or to say, hey, this happened to me. So I think that's specifically, that's the one thing that comes to mind is like, is military sexual trauma. I'll also say too, again, generally with families, women tend to be the caretakers. And so time can be a really big thing. People might be like, yeah, I'd love to, go to a support group or, do things for myself, go to the gym, go on walks. But like, sometimes people are just treading water and they're just surviving, and that goes to the side because they're like, I got kids to pick up. I got, meals to make. I got laundry to do, all that sort of thing. So I think a time piece, unfortunately, is also contributing to that.
And what comes to mind, it makes me think maybe it could be a reason why a lot of women don't identify with the military, because they say, is it 1 in 5 that, I don't know, I want to say it may be 1 in 5 that have been sexually assaulted
I
in
think
the
so. I want to
military.
say it actually might be like 1 in 4. I'd have to
Oh,
double check though.
okay. But either way is one too many. And
Yeah.
so like you said, because we're caretakers, what happens is we don't have time to you get out the military. Now your focus is on family, taking
Yep.
care of the things that you weren't able to take care of when you were in the military. And
Right.
so but men, they were in the military. Like they got
Yeah.
their hats on. You see their veteran hat on when they're in the
Yep.
mall, when they're in the store, grocery store.
Yep.
Or women, you can see them and you would never know if they've ever served unless somehow you come together and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have never imagined you served. They could be your mom, your grandma, someone you have no idea. We just don't wear it on us as a
Same.
badge. Like, speaking of women veterans struggling with mental health issues, what are some key resources available for them, and how can they access them?
So this is one of the things I it has been like maybe like a source of frustration is I feel like there are a lot of resources available. I just don't think people know about them. And there's lots of different avenues to find out about them, but then that in and of itself can feel a bit daunting. So for veterans in Texas, I mentioned the grant program that HHSC offers, which is Texas Veterans and Family Alliance. So if you Google Texas Veterans and Family Alliance, you'll find a list of the 19 providers that we give money to, and you'll be able to see the one that's closest to you and what specific services they offer, because they're all different. So you'll be able to see that. You can also visit www.texvet.org, and you'll punch in your zip code, and this will give you local resources, but it'll also give you some options that are going to be statewide and including national ones. So that's not just for mental health, but you can find things about employment, financial, things of that nature. Another really great resource is going to be veteransmentalhealth.texas.gov, which is through the Texas Veterans Commission, and this is their mental health department. Texas TVC, Texas Veterans Commission, has resources, again, for all the things that I talked about, right? Suicide prevention is not just mental health, it's housing, it's employment, all of that. It's transitioning out of, a justice involvement situation. They have a women's specific program and people that work just in that program. There's lots of things that they can offer and support you in. So I definitely recommend checking out TVC as well. And then other resources, I like to offer this one too. This is an app called Sound Off, and it's going to be sound-off.com. And what this is anonymous mental health services. This is really key for people who the stigma and or fear of career challenges being an issue that keeps them from accessing mental health services. This can really come into play. This app supports DoD contractors as well, and it provides anonymous mental health services with the same clinician through voice over IP. So they don't use phone numbers and they don't use video. So they literally have no idea who you are. You're just a voice on the other end of the phone, and you're given like a, fake name, Red Fox 123, and you'll always be with the same clinician. And they just sort of figure that the people that are accessing it are going to be veterans and people that need services. And, it's not worth, trying to verify people because they're just trying to get people the help that they deserve. So that's called sound off. And again, you're not sharing any information. They're not requiring you to get your DD 214 or show them or anything like that. You're just a person on the other end of the line that's like, hey, I need to talk to somebody. So that's another great resource as well. I'm trying to think. Okay, so what did I say? So I said Texas Veterans and Family Alliance. You can see the list. I talked about TVC. I talked about the Sound Off app.
And that's for the Sound Off app is for confidential
counseling.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And then of course there's 988, which is the suicide and crisis lifeline. So 988, you just dial it the same way you would 911. If you are a veteran or a military family member, you can press 1. If you need someone who is Spanish speaking, you can press 2. And if you are part of the LGBTQ community, you can press 3.
So I would like to move over to talk about the LGBTQ plus community, just like our women veteran and so many other groups. Their numbers are record high because we were talking about how so many times back in the day when there was don't ask, don't tell in the military, that was really difficult. I can't imagine having to hide who you are, your authentic self. And if they found out, you could possibly lose your job. Now,
Right.
Now you can, share who you are. And
you're allowed to, but does it feel okay?
Yeah. So, people still may have their biases on who you are. What would you say about those numbers?
So, similar to what you were saying before, right? You were talking about the family friend that had passed from suicide, and you said like, it doesn't always look, like the person that you thought it would. And that's a absolutely 100% true, right? Suicide can happen to anybody from any race, socioeconomic class, ethnicity, all those sort of things. We do need to look for trends, though. It's sort of the best thing we can do. And so that's why we look for trends like the military and veteran population, the LGBTQ population, things like that. When you're looking at female veterans specifically, right, like y'all are a small percentage of the veteran population. And then you add in, LGBTQ, and like, that's even a smaller sort of fraction. And so one of the things that comes up for me that I think is going to be especially challenging for that population is going back to the identity piece, right? Where when you get out of the military, if you were allowed to be your authentic self and show up as you were, and then you transition out, you're still trying to find your identity. Imagine if you weren't allowed to be your authentic self, and then you transition out and you're like, not only do I not know who the hell I am now, I don't know who the hell I was because I wasn't allowed to be that person. And like, that just adds a whole extra layer of like, shit, man.
That's a
double whammy. So I think, especially if you're in that situation, doing things, finding support, finding the people that enhance your ability to figure out your identity is going to be really helpful. And as far as the rates, I don't know what the rates are of LGBTQ female veterans. The numbers are probably somewhere online, but I just don't know them offhand. But yeah, kind of, I mean, like, again, that already is a double whammy of, you're already part of two different groups of people that are at a higher risk. So there's difference between risk and warning signs. And so we see risk in things like, the different groups outside the military community. Higher risk groups are going to be older white males. They have the highest number of suicides across the board. And so you're at a higher risk. The warning signs are different. So we don't want to assume just because you're part of this community, like that you're, at risk, right? Go ahead.
Well, no, it's interesting you say that because the friend, he was an older white male.
Yeah.
Are very connected to someone,
Hmm.
you kind of can tell to a certain degree if they're having issues because they won't be the same.
Hmm.
They become more detached and they isolate. And I've
Hmm.
actually had to ask someone if they were thinking about committed suicide, and they said yes.
Hmm.
And that was like right after training that
Yeah.
I actually, I check in with them periodically. And so my thing is I was able to identify that because I knew that they became very, you know, detached and they weren't moving the way they normally would.
Right.
So that was my sign, is to check in on people when they don't show up like they normally show up, because people have patterns
Yeah. And
in your
you bring up something really important, which is asking the question. And so we tell people when we're doing trainings and things like that, that if suicide has crossed your mind, it has probably crossed theirs. And if it hasn't, again, based on research, people are not going to be offended or angry at you. And if they are for a short period of time, they're generally going to appreciate that you cared enough to ask the question. And so we offer trainings specifically on that, on how to ask someone if they're experiencing thoughts of suicide, because it's very important that you are clear and direct. You say things like
Yes.
suicide, kill yourself, end your life. You're
And
staying
how?
away. Right. And you're staying away from harming yourself. You're staying away from phrases like, or you're watching your tone and you're not saying like, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Because even if you're saying it clearly, if you say it like that, people are like, well, God, I'm not going to tell you now because I can sense the judgment from a mile away. And like that
Yes.
doesn't help anybody. So we need to say it in a non-judgmental, caring, clear way.
Yes.
And then say, thank you for telling me. Like, what's been
Mhm,
going on? Tell me, how you've gotten to this place, and what can I do
mhm,
to support you? What can we do to help keep you safe? And
mhm.
again, not an easy task, which is why we offer these trainings. So I'll just throw this out there. If anyone's interested, you can shoot me an email. I'm sure we'll add my email at the end, but it's tara.reyna. You can see my name on the thing, tara.reyna at hhs.texas.gov. There's also a self-directed training that's called CALM, or it's counseling on access to lethal means. I believe it's about 2 hours, and that's specifically on what I was talking about in the very beginning of the episode about putting time and distance between someone and their intended mechanism. But there's, other ways to learn about how to support someone and how to ask that question. So, sorry, I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but I was like, oh, this is actually a really great thing, like to talk about being, clear and concise.
So I went ahead and put your information on here for those that want to get suicide prevention training or have any questions. You can email Tara at tara.reyna@hhs.texas.gov, as she said. And you said some really great information that was very helpful. One is that if we do find ourselves knowing someone that may be in that space, is asking the question, but also with compassion, finding a way that they may want to commit suicide is one thing. Like, is it by pill? Is it by gun? And now figuring out how you may be able to get the weapon that they may have or may want to use, temporarily, until you can get them help and support. So I
Right.
definitely appreciate all that you have, given today. Like, it just reiterates that suicide training. And I
Yeah.
think you can never take the training more than once. I think you could take it over and over, just to where it's second nature, because as I said earlier, this is not exclusive to the military community. It's,
Correct.
it happens to our civilian friends. And one thing about it is that when we're in the military, one thing is big now, and it may have not been in the past, but we talk about mental health a lot in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And, the military has us taking care of ourselves. Every 6 months, we have a physical, we have to take care of our dental and things like that. So we talk about these topics, but as civilians, that does not happen. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to go to get a physical every year or every 6 months, you're just not going to do it. There's some people who've never had a physical in their life,
Yeah.
And so I'm very, very grateful for that. So we definitely have to check on our civilian friends as well as our military friends. And, although I know I talk about this space is for women veterans, but I want to make sure we don't forget everyone that could be having a mental health crisis. And so, again, I just want to thank you so much for just being here and sharing so much information. Again, you shared about the Texas Veteran Commission, the Sound Off app, the Texas vet.org, and so many more. And I'll make sure that I put that information in within our conversation on the caption, or I'll have that
Perfect.
available for everyone. But
Yeah.
anyhow, thank you so much for being here. And
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome, and you're always welcome back. And so I appreciate you.
Yeah, you have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. As we conclude this episode, a heartfelt thank you to Tara Reyna for sharing her invaluable insights and shedding light on the critical work of suicide prevention for veterans and for other populations. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a review if you found this episode impactful. Remember, your support helps amplify the voices of women veterans and those dedicated to their well-being. Until next time, stay connected, stay informed, and stay empowered with She Vets It.